Are you ready to go tripping? How about through Ontario's cottage country? Producer Mitch Azaria is back with the boat tour next on Brio TV, the podcast. Hi there. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Bill Brio. My guest on this episode is an award-winning documentary filmmaker who's made 5 previous films for TV Ontario in the Tripping series. So far, they've taken viewers on real-time immersive voyages all over the province of Ontario. I'm talking Niagara Falls, the Rideau Canal, north of Superior, up the Bruce Peninsula, and along the French River. Now, heading into a summer when Canadians may be less inclined than ever to cross the border, he's taking us to a lush region that also happens to be the most valued real estate market in all of Canada. Yes, starting this April 20th on TVO and also streaming online, you can go tripping the Muskoka Lakes. There's a reason they call parts of this region Millionaires and even Billionaires Row. The boathouses along they're absolutely stunning. Besides the pleasure of riding along next to a sleek, locally built mahogany Duke runabout, newly converted to electric power, you will see Lake Rosso, Muskoka, and Lake Joseph like you've never seen them before. Stop waiting for an invitation from Martin Short to drop over for wine and dine at his cottage. Hear all about this place now from the skipper himself, filmmaker Mitch Azaria. Congratulations on tripping the Muskoka Lakes. Mitch, this seems like the quintessential Ontario tripping, and one that you've probably considered 5 times already. Why is now the time that you're jumping into the Muskoka Lakes?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is quintessential, isn't it? And I don't know why. I guess the reason was that we were looking for another boat trip, and this one just seemed like a great trip. I'd never been to the Muskokas.
Wow.
Lived in Toronto for 40 years.
Amazing.
Never, have you been?
Yeah. No, I have been. When I was growing up, my dad was good buddies with a baker where I live now in Orangeville, Gord Breeden. He had a cottage, Lake of the Bays, not quite Muskoka, but Dorset, that area. And we used to visit, and he had a great boat. We would bomb around there. I remember the boat had an 8-track tape deck. That's how long ago this was. And the only 8-track he had was Nancy Sinatra. These boots are made for walking. So I heard a lot of that on Lake of Bays. But then I've driven over Bracebridge and then the Muskokas as well. But this is the total exploration for folks who have not been. This 3-hour tour that you've got now on TVO coming up April. What's the exact date?
20th.
April 20th on TV Ontario and at tvo.com. So tell us what was the thinking behind it. And you mentioned that you were looking to do another boat trip. You guys have been on the back of a hawk. You've been on a sailboat around the tip of the Bruce. That tripping the Rideau with that magnificent mahogany craft was so beautiful. Was that part of the thinking behind why you wanted to get back in a boat?
Yeah, it was. And the beautiful part about this is we found, Muskoka has a tremendous history of boat building, tremendous history. I mean, to the point where the guy who you're sitting next to in this boat ride is a boat builder. He worked for Duke Boats for a long time, and this is a Duke boat, and Duke boats are sort of famous coming out of Port Carling, and they build these beautiful mahogany boats. But they also rose to the occasion during World War II and built some of the landing craft that were used in D-Day. And
wow.
But the first thing he said to us was, you see these boathouses, and we said, yeah, I mean they're tremendous boathouses, especially the older ones, the ones from the early 1900s. And he said they're a result of these beautiful boats. If you have a beautiful boat, when you were building them back in the early 1900s. You valued them to the point where you wanted to protect them. So then you built a boathouse, and then the boathouse had to be, sort of, equally as beautiful as the boat, equally as beautiful as your cottage. And so, they built these tremendous boathouses. So he said, if you ever are on a lake that has great boathouses, it has great boats.
Yeah. Oh, that's for sure. And there's something about, my dad had a 16-foot mahogany Shepherd. I think it was Grew. Is that trying to remember now, the manufacturer was several years ago now, but I remember he spent more time sanding and painting it than actually riding around in it. The mahogany it's the perfect material because it's a bit lighter hardwood, right? And it just seemed to cut through the water like butter, right?
That's the beautiful thing. I mean, these things, this is a 54 Playmate, and the Playmate was, built by Duke. They were sort of they were the boat that, the affordable mahogany boat. And what he's done, he's well into his 60s, but he's completely committed to green power. So he's converted this boat from gasoline to electric. And wow. We were kind of his first ride on this electric boat. So now you have this, absolutely, gorgeous mahogany boat, but it's running silent and it's running green. And to me, that's way more attractive.
That's astounding, and more attractive as a filmmaker because you've got camera and sound aboard and you don't hear that the whole time. And I remember looking back out of the back end of my dad's boat, there was enough of a gas slick half the time to kill half the fish in Lake Huron. So an electric, what a genius move that,
interestingly, it's controversial up there.
Why?
Because they don't think that these old boats should be anything but gasoline, and that you should be able to, to get that power. But in fact, electric is, as you know, because you see it in cars, it's quicker than gasoline. But they just think there's a beautiful yacht being converted. It's just finishing its conversion up there, called the Wanda 3. It was the Eaton's boat.
Oh,
I mean, just
wow.
a magnificent yacht. 97 feet.
Wow.
Beautiful boat. And the folks up there at the Discovery Center, because it's going to be a boat that people can take through the lakes or rent privately and have parties on. And they made the decision to turn it to electric, and it was controversial. The purists said no. These are gasoline. They're meant to be gasoline. We need to hear the engines. We need to have them run in the traditional way. But for me, I'm not a boat guy, but it's a no-brainer. I mean, right. Why wouldn't you be electric?
Well, it's interesting. We talked off air just a few minutes ago about the Jay Leno podcast, and I asked him, he has over 200 cars and another 90 motorcycles or something in LA. Said, are you converting a lot of these beauties to, other power sources, electric? And it was like I asked him, are you going to, jump off the CN Tower? Like, he literally, part of the objection was, by the way, he's like, you can buy a new electric car for cheaper than it costs to convert one. And, if you can find a Tesla that's not bursting into flames right now, as you say, if you jump in one, boy, step on the gas, that goes like a shot. So it isn't a power thing. It's as you say, it's the whole mystique of the sound and smells and everything else. Yeah.
And, look, Jay, by the way, I love that interview.
Well, thank you very much.
I think he should be an adopted Canadian. I mean, he really explained, the American sentiment really well. I mean, he's a true classy guy.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to talk to him. I've talked to him a few times over the years about cars even, and he seemed really shaken by it. And, he's had a tough couple of years. He's had some falls, and but he's on his feet. He's going to be at Casino Rama, and I'm sure folks will get their money's worth. But thank you for saying that. Maybe you can have Jay take him around Muskoka in one of these boats. Go visit Martin Short.
It would have to be gasoline powered, right? He probably wouldn't step into an electric boat.
No, he would be horrified. He'd run back to Windsor. And so how did you contact and set this up with the specific boat that is used in tripping the Muskoka Lakes?
So, sometimes you meet folks along the way, and he was a guy, his name's Stan Hunter, and I saw a little video that someone did on him as a boat builder. And I heard him, and I thought, this is a guy that he really takes a lot of time to think about, what he does, and he's third generation on the lake. His great grandfather gave the first sermon. He was a preacher that worked sort of on the road, but also had a place in the Muskokas. And there's a church called the Church of the Kettles, and it's a boat-only church. And one of the things, not being a boat person, that I realized...
Mitch, sorry, a boat-only church? Explain that. You literally have to own a boat or sit in a boat? How does it work?
Or be able to swim a long distance to get to the church.
I see. Okay, got it. It's on an island. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's actually not on an island, but it's on a non-accessible part of the mainland. So the only way to get to this church is by boat.
Wow.
To the point where during COVID, they gave all of the sermons. With everybody sitting in their boat and just the preacher, on land. But it's a beautiful, beautiful church. And his grandfather gave the first sermon. We see it in the film. In fact, we were talking about it last night because our challenge on that scene was to be able to get the drone, because it's a drone shot that we wanted to show the sermon inside of the church, but we're on the water with Stan. So you probably watched the series Hacks.
Oh, of course.
The comedy series.
Rachel's coming back in a week. Yeah.
She's terrific.
She's really, really good. It's a very funny show. Both of them are great.
Both of them are great. Yeah. They opened either the second or third series with a shot that comes down the Las Vegas Strip.
Yes.
She gets out of a limousine. It follows her into the hotel. The door opens. It goes all the way through the casino, and then ends up with in the big lounge where she's performing. And I kept thinking, how could they do that shot? That's a tricky shot. And I saw a behind the scenes where what they did was they caught the drone just before it enters the door into the casino. So we have our director, we call him Four Fingers Morrison, because he almost lost part of a finger trying to catch a drone before. But we figured if we place him on the dock kind of doing something and the drone goes over him, he could catch the drone and then walk it into the church. And anyway, he was able to do it without, because the drone has to turn off, right, when you catch it. Otherwise, you're going to get a haircut for free.
Is his name now Three Fingers? Did that go okay? What happened?
Two fingers now, actually.
Wow.
Bigger drone.
He's going to be giving you the finger.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah, so he walked it into the church to finish the shot. I got to look for that.
Right to the preacher, right to the altar. So it's a cool shot.
I hope the sermon is on the loaves and the fishes. It would something that would tie in. This makes me want to go to church all of a sudden, Mitch. This sounds fantastic. What a brilliant way to celebrate up in Muskoka.
The other thing that caught me really off guard, sorry to interrupt, is that Muskoka, because you're a history guy too, right? Is that the whole place was settled for free. To think that today it's the most expensive, because it's by square footage, it's more expensive than land in Toronto or a homestead in Toronto. Yeah. But it was all given away for free, when the Canadian government wanted to to make sure that there was settlement, in their sort of northern border, because I'm not that it's that far north, but in those days, their northern border. To think that, that was free land and now it's the most expensive, probably in Canada, I would think, right?
Oh, I can't imagine unless Vancouver sneaks in anything that might be worth more, but mighty big of the Canadian government to steal it from the First Nations folks and give it away for free. But it, as you say, is not free today. We'll be right back with filmmaker Mitch Azaria in just a moment.
This month on Super Channel Fuse, check out the Canadian premiere of Night Sleeper, April 17th. In this wide-awake, 6-part thriller, hackers send a Glasgow to London train hurtling towards death and destruction, as two strangers then go to extremes to regain control before it's too late. Meanwhile, over on Super Channel Heart and Home, it's season 2 of When Hope Calls. The spin-off of the smash hit romantic drama When Calls the Heart stars Canadians Cindy Busby and Christopher Russell. She's the new lawyer in town on a mission. He's the Mountie who sees her as a person of interest. Before you can say good day, ma'am, courting ensues. Tune in for Night Sleeper and When Hope Calls, plus uncut, commercial-free movies galore this and every month on Super Channel, available via most cable providers across the country.
Here he is again, Mitch Azaria. And I understand too, Mitch, when was this shot? Last summer? Last fall?
Last summer, yeah. All summer, yeah.
And from what I understand, the ice storm we just had ripped through Muskoka, hit it pretty hard, and you've captured all the beauty, but there must have been some trees down, I guess, right?
Yeah, I heard that they really had a tough time. I mean, they had a tough winter too, a really, really tough winter. And I think they traditionally get a fair amount of snow, and we thought for a while that we wanted to do it maybe as a 3-season, to be able to turn the lake, frozen and go from a boat to an electric skidoo or something. But we weren't expecting the kind of winter. We didn't do that. We've done it in the past. We did it on our train.
I was going to say,
episode.
It worked very effectively there. And you're way up north of Sudbury for that one. It's fascinating to see that morph into winter in those scenes. Was there, I know you guys have lots of animation generally, you sort of recreate things. Did you do any of that on Tripping the Muskoka Lakes?
Yeah, there's been very little, loss of life and shipwrecks in the Muskoka Lakes because, for the most part, they're fairly benign lakes and, you can get to shore, fairly quickly. And, there's enough boat traffic out there that if you get into trouble, you can be rescued. But in 1934, and it's always the case. It was the case also when we were up in Bruce. There's one last run that they're doing late in the year, and this was a steamship, and it was on its last run, and it was hit by a real freak storm, and the storm sort of hit it on the stern, so it sort of pushed it over, and when it pushed it over, it took water very, very, very quickly, and within a minute, it went from happily sailing to underwater. So we animated that sort of fateful, it was sort of late afternoon when the Wyoming was hit by wind and then went down to the bottom. But what's even cooler about that, the animation's kind of cool, but nobody's really been able to to film the wreck itself. They lots of attempts and it's just difficult because the water is really, really dark. A little bit of current, a lot of sediment, and we've got this couple that have a underwater drone, and they're Zach and Yvonne, and they just did a film about they do mostly films on the Great Lakes, but they can go up to 300 meters underwater and control this drone that's probably about the size of remember our old wagons, right? That sort of size.
Yeah.
So we were able with that drone and its lights to be able to film the Wyoming, I think, for the first time, at least properly for the first time, where we really see the entire ship, and it's haunting because it's sitting straight up. Yeah. And it's sad because 3 lives were lost. But it's just amazing to see coming out of seeing the boat in animation, a realistic animation.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm sure these are factoids that pop up probably on the surface of the lake, as you tend to do. They're fabulous. I love reading all that. How deep generally is the lakes around Muskoka?
I think the deepest is Joseph, and we love Canadian references when we can sneak them in. So in one of those factoids, we say that it's as deep as the Peace Tower is tall. In Ottawa. Yeah, so it's about 93 meters. Yeah, it's deep. It can be deep water.
That's really. I'm surprised. That's really deep. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and it's all shield up there, right? So you can kind of see it because you figure whatever is above water is probably has at least the same depth underwater. But one of my favorite factoids up there is this whole debate between the Adirondack chair and the Muskoka chair. Because that's sacred ground, right?
It is. What do you call it?
The Muskoka chair.
Yeah. So did you settle this issue?
We spent a lot of time trying to. Well, I think we solved it. I think we did, because what I found was that in 1905, the Adirondack chair was actually patented in Adirondack. But interestingly, Muskoka's got a long history of tuberculosis sanatoriums. They were established in the early 1900s because the idea was the air was clean. These were good places for people. And as in the early 1900s, I think TB was the leading killer, right? It was it's a horrific disease of the lungs. But if you look at the Muskoka chair or the Adirondack chair, it's kind of the chair that they were using in the Muskokas for the TB patients, because you sort of lean back. You've got these wide arms.
Yeah.
You've kind of spread your rib cage out on these chairs. And apparently, they were there, for the TB patients. So, you can say that there was a patent in Adirondack, but there was probably the same chair, being built at the same time in Muskoka as well.
I have a cousin, Mike Brio. He's a woodworker, and he made me one out of hockey stick shafts. I'll send you a picture. It's fantastic. It's really quite cool. But I actually I was covering something for the Toronto Sun, I think, and I went to a haunted house. They have these reality shows, and it was a sanatorium in Kentucky near Louisville. And it was quite creepy, because they built this structure in the 20s, maybe even a bit earlier, and they faced the headwinds and they blew through the place. And that was the cure, was just fresh air. So I Muskoka would be perfect for that.
Were the walls rounded?
They were like a book. It was sort of open. It was sort of built on a split that sort of scooped a bit. Yeah,
because the early ones, they said that they built them. There's not too many left, but they built them without square walls. That the walls were sort of rounded so that dust didn't collect and stuff. Because so much about keeping clean air and for damaged lungs. Yeah.
Wow. Well, this is all the stuff you learn. Now, do you manage? A lot of people, they've heard Muskoka. It's the place where the stars have their summer homes. Martin Short, of course. I think Goldie Hawn a few years ago had one up there. Do you sail past anybody famous? Do we get a glimpse of Marty up there with Steve Allen? Steve Allen, that'd be interesting.
Whoa.
Wow. Steve Martin. Oh my goodness. Steve Allen would have a joke about that. Anyway, you see where I'm going, Mitch.
Yeah, no, and we didn't see any stars, but what I found, the two kind of things, because I hadn't been there before. One is that it was way less crowded than I thought it was going to be. I thought the lakes were just going to be absolutely buzzing. I don't know what made me think that. I just thought, well, it's the Muskokas. They're going to be
that was my assumption. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we were there on multiple times. We were there over long weekends, and it never felt crowded. Even Bracebridge and Gravenhurst, and it never felt like it was that busy. I'm not sure why, but no, we didn't see any stars. But there's Millionaires Row and Billionaires Row, and both are interesting. And Millionaires Row I found more interesting than Billionaires Row, and also way more picturesque, right?
Huh.
And I don't know if you know its history, but it's mostly American. It's still to this day. It's probably the majority of folks are U.S. And it was a really simple thing. It was the same thing that they were trying to sort of market this place to Americans, and Americans really took to it, particularly in Pennsylvania. So you've got all of these, like the Mellons, from Pittsburgh, establishing cottages. I mean, they weren't, they were rambling cottages. It's a great story about Mellon, because he was the Treasury Secretary in the U.S. And he was in, I think he was in Bracebridge, and he had forgotten his wallet, and he was in a store, and he said to the clerk, could you extend me the $3, and I'll come back and pay you. And she said, well, I can't. How am I going to do that? And he said, well, do you happen to have an American bill in your drawer? And she had one. He pulled it out and he signed his name. And he said, does that look familiar? Because his name, of course, was on the $1 bill.
That is fantastic. I hope that's a true story, Mitch. That's incredible.
Yeah, you kind of hope that one is.
Yeah. Well, very funny.
That's an interesting point. It's hard in these sort of places that don't have a ton of recorded history to say what's folklore and what's accurate, because some of these stories, they live on, but it's mostly because they're just great stories.
Well, would Mr. Mellon be the Secretary to the Treasury today? We need him back. And do you dock? And I apologize, Mitch, as we were going on there. It's been a crazy whirlwind. I'm going to watch every minute of this, but I haven't so far. But do you pull in? Do you dock along the way and en route on the 3 hours?
Yeah, the other thing that I learned about the Muskokas, or just about, I guess, lakes and boats and that kind of culture, is that you do everything from your boat, right? I mean, we talked about going to church in your boat. Our people that we're in the boat with, Bill, Stan, and Kathleen, they do everything by boat, right? So they go to the grocery store by boat. They could easily go to the LCBO by boat. They could easily get a new wardrobe by boat. The lock in Port Carling is a self-serve lock. So you literally, you get out of your boat and you lock yourself through this one tier lock.
Wow.
It's this whole cool boat culture, which I thought, well, that's neat. I never knew. So when I saw it, I thought, well, we have to find a way to record this. So part of what they did is they went for lunch, but they went to a grocery store where they just pulled over to a dock, walked into the grocery store, got back into their boat, and I thought, well, that's cool. I could see a summer of that.
Yeah, no kidding. That's fantastic. And the water, my memory up there is that it's unlike Huron, which is where our cottage is fairly sandy bottom. It's twiggy, like it's a little more reedy toward the shores. Is that what you discovered?
Yeah, and that's that was the challenge of filming the wreck, right, is that the water there is a dark tea, right? It's a mucky bottom. It's not been, I think, part of that, as you know, because you've got history in Huron. I mean, Huron, because of the seaway and the Great Lakes and the bringing in of the great freighters and all of the mussels that came with it. That was. I mean, you already had fairly clear water in Huron because of all the limestone, but of course, the mussels were the next extent of that. But no, Muskokas aren't affected in that way. So the lakes are quite dark, and apparently the water is really, really soft. We only got one chance to swim in, and it felt that way. But it became, they marketed the soft water as well. They marketed the soft water, clean air, and for whatever reason, they were really marketing, particularly after World War One, the lack of mosquitoes, and that it was that the plant life up there lent itself not to have whatever plants gave you hay fever. So if you had hay fever, the Muskokas, and there were posters and advertisements, and so, I mean, apparently Muskoka could cure almost anything you had.
Wow. There's not as many cedars, I think. Perhaps, I don't know what the mosquito connection would be. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I think it's more just that, that there's a lot of breeze up there.
That's true. Hey, don't go tripping away. Mitch will be right back. Time once again to check in with Emily Gagne to see what's new on Hollywood Suite. Emily, what do you got?
Well, this month, Bill, we've got a new episode of Cinema A to Z, which is our original series. And the topic this time is acting debuts.
Acting. So these are the first films of some famous stars. Go ahead and quiz me. Throw a name at me, see if I can get the film.
How about Barbra Streisand?
Oh, that's The Mirror Has Two Noses. Is that
no.
It? No. It's Funny Girl.
Yes,
right.
Okay. A little further back.
All right. Okay. Well, that sounds pretty good. What else do you have coming up this month?
Well, we've got National Canadian Film Day, April 16th. So we've got Canadian films all day. But if you are in more of a, funny mood, it's April Fool's Day. We've got our LOL collection, got comedies from throughout cinematic history, everything from, The 7-Year Itch to Caddyshack to Liar Liar to The Nice Guys, which I think is an underrated comedy.
Oh, that's a funny film. Well, that sounds great. Looks like a good time to laugh in Canada on Hollywood Suite. Thanks very much, Emily.
Thank you, Bill.
What's new this month on Paramount Plus? Well, first up, dive into the intricate web of a powerful crime family in the Paramount Plus original series, Mobland, from Guy Ritchie. Tom Hardy, Pierce Brosnan, Helen Mirren, and Joanne Froggatt all star. In mid-April, catch the premiere of The Carters, Hurts to Love You. This two-part documentary looks back at teen heartthrobs Nick and Aaron Carter. Their story is told by Aaron's twin sister, Angel, who unpacks the complicated family dynamics that led to the untimely death of 3 of the original 5 Carter kids, as well as their father. Speaking of music documentaries, Paramount Plus has the season 2 premiere of Family Legacy, which offers a peek inside the lives of influential musicians and bands through the lens of their close family members. This season features interviews with relatives of Busta Rhymes, Lil Wayne, Rob Thomas, Daddy Yankee, Lil Jon, and more. There's not little about this month on Paramount Plus. There's lots for the entire family. Check it out. And we're back. Now, in 3 hours, you could see a lot of Muskoka, I would imagine. Do you show quite a bit?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is I think there's 1,600 lakes in the Muskokas, and we had to make a decision about, and there's a lot. I mean, what defines a lake exactly, but yeah, it's a lot of lakes up there. But we decided that we were going to do what they call the three big lakes, and when you say to folks locally, what are the Muskoka Lakes, and they will tell you clearly that it's Muskoka, Rosso, and Joseph.
Right.
And so that hence the title, the Muskoka Lakes. And I'm sure there's going to be folks that are unhappy with that decision of ours, but at some point you have to decide, what you're going to do. And, Stan has this beautiful mahogany boat, and he wants to get it up to the top of Joseph, where there's an inn that has some interest in getting his boat and using it as a rental. So we start in Gravenhurst at the bottom of Lake Muskoka.
Beautiful.
Which, by the way, we talked about not being very populated in the summertime. Like that marina, which could, I don't know how many slips there were. We never saw even a third of them full. So, and that's where the Winona 2 and the Seguin, which is, I think, one of Canada's most famous boats, because it's the largest still operating steamboat work out of. And those are boats that, anybody can come and take a tour of the lakes on, and they're just such elegant boats. I mean, you really feel like it. I read something too that the Winona this year has added another tier with a bunch of staterooms, so you can actually spend the night on a 2-day trip through the lakes. So anyway, we start at the bottom of the three lakes in Gravenhurst and go all the way up. And, that includes all kinds of sites, which Millionaires Row, Billionaires Row. We go into Bracebridge. We go by a beautiful bird sanctuary. And just like, there is no doubt that some of those cottages are, I mean, there's boathouses bigger than, Rosedale mansions. I mean, it is a little breathtaking in that way.
I'd heard that there's a new program with the Winona that they have a deal. You can ride it all day long. It's called the Winona Rider. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Mitch.
You know Jay Leno.
Yeah, I know. I'm no Jay Leno. You mentioned Gravenhurst and the inn there.
That was really bad.
It's so bad.
But in a really good way.
Thank you. How do we get out of this? So there's the inn at Gravenhurst. This is a lake which had a lot of these legendary lakes and lodges and inns, some of which have are no longer there, right? I don't know. Do you touch on some of that history when you are recreating some of the voyage?
Yeah, and we bring one back to life. You're asking the animation. Yeah, we bring back the sort of the queen of all of those, called the Royal Muskoka, and we bring her back to life. And she was, tremendous. But what I found really interesting, and it's just, the way life goes, right, is there was this massive, just absolutely 5-star resort. It like multiple pools and covered walkways and every water toy you can imagine, just sparkling hotel. And right beside it was what's left of the Cleveland's house. And Cleveland's house was, one of the great old hotels. Mm-hmm. But what's happening, and you see it, happening all over the world, it's no big revelation, is that the big sparkling hotel is owned by a chain. It's 4 seasons. It's just a massive investment. The Cleveland's house was a family-run business. Could only operate through the 3 seasons, and just couldn't sustain itself. I mean, they're side by side, and so the contrast is stunning, because you realize that era is just sort of ending, right? And the new breed of resorts could only be. It's kind of like what chain restaurants are doing to a lot of to the restaurant industry. You get these chains that can go in there, and they've got economy of scales because they got so many folks in so many locations. Yeah. But to see one right beside the other, is and you see it because we sort of flew the drone over this lovely beauty, kind of came back and then flew it over Cleveland's house and sort of explained the demise of these family run hotels.
Yeah, it's a fascinating history. I know, my parents, they got married in 1947 and they had their honeymoon in, oh my goodness, Fenland Falls. And I did some research because my dad shot a little 16 millimeter film around there, and they went to a lodge or two. I tried to see if are they still there. And of the 36 lodges in that region, I think there's one that remains because, as you say, they were family run, and it's just not sustainable. Some summers are better than others, and there's COVID and everything else killed a lot of it. So it's nice that Muskoka still offers that experience for people.
Yeah, and there are still the where we end up is a place called the Sherwood Inn, and there was some group of 7 folks that painted there. It's still one of. I mean, it now has been bought by Golf Link, but it still operates like a family style resort, and it's quite quaint, and you get that sense of an old school resort. And I kind of like those. I like it where the person greeting you isn't greeting you based on some protocol out of out of Toronto. They're genuinely saying hello because they're interested.
Yeah, well, that's a great experience. I'm glad you captured that. Anything else that might be a bit different on tripping the Muskokas from your other films in Ontario?
I think that what separates this one is that so many people know about the Muskokas, right? I mean, in Southern Ontario, it's arguably the most famous cottage country, right? You can kind of get the Fourth is in there, but I think the Muskokas have a mystique about them. So it's an opportunity. I would have watched this, because I had never been to the Muskokas, to see the Muskokas without, having to actually get up there. Because it's if you do go there, you're going to spend some dough, right? I mean, everything is
right.
Slightly inflated up there, right? Yeah. So this is kind of a nice way to see it without having to spend any dough.
Do they still have Santa's Village in Bracebridge?
Oh yeah.
I was
that was owned by Frank Miller, right? Our ex-premier for a
really
while.
Miller time at Santa's. I didn't know that. I never knew that.
Yeah, the street it's on is called Frank Miller Way.
Oh, okay, nice. Stuff you learn from tripping the Muskoka Lakes in all your films. There's 5 of them now, right, that you've made in this series? Mitch, am I missing any?
Yeah, this is number 6. Yeah.
This is number 6. Congratulations.
6, yeah.
These are wonderful films. If you haven't seen any, oh my goodness, take a voyage all around Ontario. A lot of regions that you wouldn't get to, north, south, east, west. You've covered the province really well. Do you have an idea where your next stop might be? What's left that you're curious about?
I'm curious about a lot of things. I think the next one we're going to try and figure out, because we've been on boats and we've been on trains and we've been on sailboats, and I think we're going to try to think of a new way to get around. So I've got something in mind, but until I kind of work it out, I hate to say it because then it won't come true.
Right. Well, in the span of those 6 films, you had some drone work right at the very start at the Rideau, I think. But the technology keeps advancing. You must find there are things you could do with this latest Muskoka project that wasn't available to you even just 6 years ago.
It is amazing. I mean, not only that, so the drone for sure, but the camera that we were using on the Rideau, was this big, huge, heavy camera with a big, huge rig that was, couple $100,000. And now we're using something that's a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the size. I mean, the technology, look at, the iPhone is the perfect example. I mean, if you follow the progression of the iPhone, you can get that sense of progression in the professional end of things, right? I mean, the iPhone now, when it got its I think it was the 13, they went out and studied, the 50 top films in the world and figured out, how those shots were captured, and then built into that, software, the ability to sort of, so you get those the ability to, to rack focus, or the ability to, lose depth of field. I mean, it's mind boggling. And the same thing's happening, in the professional world.
I remember talking to you about that, the setup, the camera setup for the Rideau Canal dock, and how I think there was like 2 cameras that were in North America that you could use for that project, because it really sits you in that boat like you're able to turn your head just like a human would. You gave it that perspective that you were in the boat, and that camera made it possible, right?
Yeah, you've got a great memory, because that you're right. There were 2 cameras. It was mostly the ability to run for a long period of time. Right? That was the challenge, and that's what this new camera, rig does for us as well. And I think when we've done it well, that's kind of what we leave you with, is that you've gone on this boat trip, right? That you've experienced this place, and that you've experienced it with an enriched storytelling that, of these 200 little pop-ups that come up and say, give you a fact that makes the place more relevant to you. And what I've really tried to lean on this time is when you see something, when the camera sees something, and you're curious about it, can I answer that question for you? And I think that's why we have more of them this time. So if you're seeing a tree and you're thinking, that tree looks kind of weird, I'm going to tell you, what kind of tree it is and why it caught your attention.
Well, that's a great way into it for you as the creator and producer of this series. To these TVO films, these are the most watched films on TVO. They're incredible. I'm a huge fan. And this is the point, Mitch, where I tell you what your next project is, because I did suggest one of them to you one time to go to the Bruce.
More than one, I think, though.
Okay, so this is the next one. All right, you ready? Because now you've got me thinking, because you got
my pen.
You got the pen. So you've got me thinking, because you want a new way to tell it, a new way in, and I've got the idea. So go right to the top. Go to the Churchill, to go to the top of Ontario. You got that great bays up there. You've got and basically this one is you're going to tell the story aboard a Russian submarine. Okay, because that's what's patrolling up there now. And this whole the who owns the North, and we're going to have to boost our military. That's the idea. 3 hours hunting for subs, American Russian subs in up in James Bay. What do you think?
I've written it down. I'm pitching it. I'm going to pitch it.
Well, good luck getting that on a TVO, but Mr. Ferriser will probably think that's a great idea. And these films are available not just on TVO starting April 18th, did you say?
20th.
April 20th. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
And they're 3 hour. It's a voyage that you take. It's totally real time and very unique. And you just get all the beauty and wonder of each region. Where else can people see these documentaries? They stream. Is it tvo.org? Where's the other ability to see them digitally?
And it's. I think that the streaming even happens before the broadcast. So,
right.
And the beautiful part about the streaming is you can watch it in 4K, which you can't on TVO. Yeah, 4K. You know what? There is an actual difference. Like there truly is a difference. Yeah.
Well, if ever a series was designed for 4K, this is it, because you put a lot of attention into getting the camera work just perfect. So congratulations, Mitch. I can hardly wait to watch the rest of the Tripping the Muskoka Lakes, April 20th on TVO and elsewhere. And it's always a pleasure talking to you. Good to see you again.
Great to see you too, Bill, and thanks for having me.
My thanks again to Mitch Azaria, and watch Tripping the Muskoka Lakes on TVO, as well as at tvo.org and via the TVO Docs YouTube channel. My thanks as always to producer Phil Hong for paddling me down the podcast peninsula. Thanks to the cats who make the music heard on this podcast. Yes, I mean those crispy critters, featuring BJ Del Conte, Paul Boudra, and on piano, Stephen Dudley. finally, thanks to you, listener. If you liked what you heard, please spread the word. I'm Bill Brio. Thanks for listening.